Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Welcome to Parenting in the 21st Century. I'm Zina Shevchik. Today we have with us Cathleen Schwartzbeck from the Sylvan Learning Center in Niskayuna to discuss how parents can help their children become stronger and more proficient in math. Thank you for being with us today, Kathleen.
Thank you for having me.
Before we go into the topic, would you tell us a little bit about what the Sylvan Learning Centers are?
Definitely. Sylvan's been around since 1979, so we're on our 30th year now. We work with pre-K through 12th grade students, working on anything that they need help with in tutoring, reading, math, study skills, writing, SAT and ACT prep. So basically anything you can think of, we help them with.
And I understand you have several centers in the Capital District?
We have 3 centers in the Capital District. One of them's right in Albany, right down the road from Crossgates. There's one in Clifton Park, right off of 146, and in Niskayuna, St. James Square.
And what is your job exactly?
I am the director of our Niskayuna Center, so I work closely with our families there, making sure that we're meeting all their needs and giving them what they need.
Okay.
And then I get to teach too, which is my favorite part.
That's good.
Yeah.
Now, the topic today, why is math so important to children's future?
There have been a lot of studies that have been done, and a lot of information came out in the National Math Panel that came out last fall. And a lot of information about how important algebra is to our students. And they found that algebra is starting earlier and earlier for students, and it really is, Algebra 1 is the gatekeeper to all those higher level math courses. And that's the gatekeeper into a lot of colleges and success in the higher levels. There was a study that showed that success in Algebra 2 is actually the highest predictor of success in college and beyond.
Okay, that sets the stage for my next question, which is, when I was in school many years ago, 40 plus years ago, we took math in a sequence, and I took algebra in 9th grade, geometry in 10th grade, trigonometry in 11th. And am I right that algebra is taught earlier than that today?
The foundation for algebra starts in elementary school. They start working on that a lot in middle school, just really building that up, making sure students are understanding the basic concept of finding an unknown, things like that. It is starting, 9th grade is when New York State does algebra. We just went back to doing integrated algebra at that first year of high school and breaking it apart that way, but that foundation is laid a lot earlier with them now.
So when you say Algebra 2, are you actually saying that there's a second year of algebra taught in high schools these days?
There is, yes. The sequence right now is Algebra 1, geometry, Algebra 2, which has some trigonometry in it as well.
So are they teaching more than what I was taught 40 plus years ago, or my children who were taught 6 years ago in 9th grade? Are they teaching, in Algebra 2, are they teaching more algebra than what I was taught or my children were taught?
It's probably not more. It might look a little bit different and be grouped a little bit different, where some of the things that used to be higher level math electives, some of them aren't electives anymore. So that basic trig, things like that, are built right into the courses now.
Okay, so does everyone, all high school students have to graduate with Algebra 1 and Algebra 2?
I'm not 100% sure how we're working that now.
Sorry if I'm asking you a question.
That's okay. There is a year of geometry in there, and that Algebra 1 and geometry are definitely needed for all students. And we're just getting to that Algebra 2 being used in all the high schools. You might have heard of the Math A and B that we've been doing for a lot of years.
That's what my children did.
Mm-hmm. That ends, the last Math B exam will be in June. So this coming
June of 2009.
And then more of that upper level math will start going in, so I'm not totally sure what the requirements are for graduation. We're still kind of in flux with that.
So these are New York State education curriculum changes, am I
Yes.
correct? So that means that all the math has changed, or I mean the presentation and the order of math in the elementary grades has changed as well?
It's adapted with the curriculum. Just the standards and what we expect them to do has changed. The main change has happened at the high school level where we've rearranged what we taught. The math A and B was very integrated, so you did geometry along with the algebra, and it was a lot of different things together. Where now we're looking at more, let's teach the algebra in one course, geometry in the next, and so on.
I know you're not from the education department, but perhaps you can explain why maybe you can explain a little bit what your thinking is about why the change has been made back to rather than as much integration, which is what my children were taking in Math A and Math B. They were taking algebra, geometry, trig all at once, kind of. So it was kind of foreign to me, and now they're kind of going back a little bit.
They are going back to what we used to see, and that's what a lot of the states do. A lot of the other states in the United States do that, algebra, then geometry, and so on. It kind of depends on what study you read as to what works best and how it works for the students. It kind of whatever works for each student is going to be different and vary based on their needs. So we're going back. It's a little bit more in line with what you're seeing in the other states. So I'm not sure if that's the reason behind it, but that would be what I would probably guess there.
Yeah, I do remember that there has been controversy about some of the Math A and B exams, Regents exams, I want to say, if my recollection is correct. So maybe they're trying to make it a little bit simpler for everybody.
That very well could be.
Well, this works as a segue for me, because one of the reasons I found it difficult to help my children with math was because of the integration of everything at once. And so that kind of gets us into what parents can actually do to help their children want to succeed in math, enjoy math, and become proficient in it.
Definitely. That first part that you said, the children wanting to succeed in math and enjoying math, is the first step. You might hear parents or people in general might say, well, I'm just not a math person. And kids feel the same way. I'm just not a math person. I'm never going to be good at it. That's not true. Math is a taught skill that if they can truly understand the meaning behind it, they can be successful with most of it. Some of the higher level, when you get up into calculus, maybe not. But a lot of that basic math, it's a taught skill. So the more practice and the more that they hear that they can do it and they can learn it, the better they'll be. So that's the first step, encouraging them, letting them know they'll know it. They can know it. And then building a strong foundation, really working with them on those basic skills, making sure they understand even just their times tables and division tables. If they're not coming automatic and students are relying too much on a calculator, it just becomes really hard for them to get through that. So giving them that strong foundation in math is important.
That's great to hear, because I know that one of the responses to learning math in your head is, why do I have to do, some children, why do I have to do that? I have a calculator. And I always said to my daughters, well, maybe the calculator is going to break, and then what are you going to do?
That's true. Very true.
So that is one of my questions to you was, the reliance on technology these days for math. And it's not the easy way out, because to me, using a calculator for me, because I never learned how to use it when I was young in the more complicated or higher level functions, was a job in itself for me to learn. So you're recommending that it's a good practice for growing your brain. I guess growing your brain skills is to doing all that math in your head.
Yep, so. Doing the math out. It's a balancing act between the technology and being able to do the math, but you understand it much more if you have to write out even one of the problems and write all the steps. You can also find your mistake if you wrote it out, whereas if you just did it on the calculator, you can't see where you went wrong. So calculators are part of our world. Students need to know how to use them, but we need to balance that with making sure they're understanding the math they're doing.
This brings me to the point about how much help parents are supposed to, allowed, should give, how much help they should actually provide with their children when they're doing homework, actually assigned math homework or math problems.
Again, it's a balancing act. It's what the students need. You want to make sure that you're not doing every problem with the child because they need that chance to try it on their own. But if they truly don't understand a skill and they don't know how to do it, and you as a parent can help them with it, then you want to make sure you're reteaching the skill. A great way to start it out, if a student, if your child comes up and says, I don't know how to do my homework, is say, okay, well, let's go back. What did your teacher say? Tell me, reteach what you remember from class, so that they're, instead of just going back and, okay, this is how you do it, you're making them think through the process. And then as soon as you're starting to see them become a little more independent, let them try it on their own, so that they are truly internalizing the skill. You can always check in now.
At what point do you talk to the child's teacher? I mean, about, say, your child is complaining about too much homework or not being able to do it, or you, as a parent, struggle even deciphering what is supposed to be happening on the page. At what point should a parent contact a teacher?
Whenever you feel like you need to, honestly. Teachers are busy, so you need to be aware of that and make it as convenient as possible. But if you don't know how to help your child and they're really frustrated with it, the teacher's a great resource to find out, okay, well, what's expected? What's coming up? How can I help them at home? And if it is too hard, what are the next steps I need to do so that my child understands it? Using them as a resource and as a partner at any point that you feel, as long as it's not just a one-night complaining, if it's an over and over again, your child is having a hard time with the homework, then ask the teacher, how do you want me to best work with them at home?
How do you, or do you ever get this question from parents about how much is too much homework, and is homework right for the kids to have to do after a full day of school? Because I do hear that complaint from parents.
And it is, there are times when homework is taking too long for a child. If it's taking them 2-3 hours and they're only in elementary school, there's something that's not meeting up. It might not be that the amount of homework is too much. It could be that it's too hard for them, or there's something else going on. So it really depends on the child and that level of where's the frustration. Homework's an important way to continue to build the skills, so you get that practice at home and make sure there's retention. So making sure that it is that they're still gaining that retention versus just becoming frustrated and having it be something they're not learning from. That's when you want to step back and say, okay, is there something else going on here? What's the best way to help them out with that? So it really depends on what's truly going on with that child.
Right. And I would assume that talking to the teacher, the teacher would know about how much time should be spent on, or she planned on a student spending on the homework. And so that's another communication issue with the school.
That's true.
Yeah. What do you say when people? Well, let me ask you this. Do you come across gender issues with math in any of the students that come to your learning centers, or do you see differences in ability? What do you know about what the research says about ability across gender?
There is a ton of research out there, and especially when it comes to math and sciences, about what's the difference between boys and girls. And a lot of the research does lend to math and science being easier for boys, especially when you get up into the higher level. There are girls that it becomes easier for them as they go, but there is definitely research out there that says that's the case. With that said, if you find the way that will work with each child, sometimes they need to see it and really have materials to move around with their hands and use different ways to actually see the math as opposed to just doing it out. That a lot of times helps students in general. So although the research is out there, I think if you take the time to figure out what's going on, what works best for this particular child, then you can help them succeed as well and help them continue on. So you don't want to be discouraged by that. There's that little bit of a gender bias there. It's brain research, things like that. But a lot of girls are really overcoming that. In fact, there's more girls in a higher level math and science classes enrolled now than there were ever in the past, and more than boys right now. So girls are overcoming that, even though it might come slightly easier to the boys.
And I also think the culture's changing, in my opinion, in women being able to be successful in science and math and not being labeled unfeminine, you know, or anything else like that. So, but I think I have there still is a breakdown in the middle school. Am I correct? And that's when maybe girls tend to back off a little bit from the math or start to have more trouble with math. Am I right?
That's what some of the research lends to. It's when you start to get into those algebra concepts, those higher level concepts, that it's a little bit harder for them to understand. Girls' brains tend to be, and this is just, again, general, tend to lean towards that reading and that writing, where the math is a different type of concept to learn. So when you get into that higher level math, it can be harder. But again, finding that best way to having them teach back, having them see the story behind the math can be really useful to use that strength they already have and bring it into the math.
And certainly this is probably where parents as well as teachers can make a big difference in the elementary grades with girls. If they understand what we know about the research. I know that research changes. I mean, it's evolving certainly about, you know, brain research. So what can parents do? Let's start with the you know, elementary grades and younger, about what parents might be able to do to help their kids succeed at math. Are there specific examples you might be able to give us?
They definitely want to be aware of what's going on in the classroom. What are they learning at that time? So talking to their teacher, finding out what does my child need to know by the end of the year, and building it into their everyday activities. So if you know that a younger student is learning their addition facts, even when you're just working in the kitchen, make something into an addition problem. Building it into everyday life and talking about math, so it's not a dreaded, well, I'm not good at math, so I don't need to worry about it, can really help, even with those really young students who are just learning fractions, things like that. So let's take a quarter of the pizza. There's 4 of us. How are we going to split it up? Things like that.
Right.
Is important.
People who don't, I know as myself as a mother, I don't always, I'm not always aware of how I am using math every day, whether it's cooking or what you just said, you know, measuring laundry detergent, aside from my job and keeping schedules and things like that, at home there's a lot of math going on in day-to-day things, and we're not, it's interesting that we're not aware of that, whereas we understand that if we're reading something or comprehending, well, whether it's reading a recipe or it's reading to our children or it's reading instructions on how to use something, you know, we can say, well, you need to know math, you need to know you need to be able to read to understand, to move forward. But math, we don't talk about like that. And so that's, I think that's eye-opening for a lot of parents to be able to figure out the their own day-to-day uses of math. So that's great. I understand that that you have a course for parents about that is geared toward kind of retraining parents in some of the basics of the math that students need to succeed in algebra. Is that, am I right?
You are right. We have a math course. It's called Forgotten Math for Parents. And what happened is we hear a lot of parents, especially when you get into that middle school, starting high school, that they want to help their child, but they've forgotten how to do it. When's the last time you had to divide fractions without using a calculator? Things like that. And a lot of the terminology has also changed in how we talk about numbers and the math words that are used now. Where I remember when I was taught how to subtract double-digit numbers, I have to borrow, where now it's regrouping. Little things like that have changed. And they need to know that terminology to help their child. That's not the way my teacher told me to do it. Parents hear that all the time.
Yes.
So we want to make sure parents are equipped with the knowledge of how is it being taught and what are the steps. So we've come up with Forgotten Math for Parents. It's a free seminar. It takes about an hour and a half to come to. And we talk a little bit about math, but then we have different stations set up with our math teachers. And parents go from station to station, spend about 15 to 20 minutes. and they relearn everything, not everything, but they relearn the basics of fractions and algebraic equations and things like that, so that when their child comes to them, they can answer their questions. We just had one up in Clifton Park, and we heard back from a parent actually this past week that my child brought me her homework and I could help her this time. It was great. She was very excited about it because she knew how to do decimals again. She hadn't remembered that, so.
I think that's important too. If children see that their parents know a little bit, maybe know a little bit more about their math, because then they might be able to think, well, maybe I do need it for later life, even if I'm not going to, or don't think I'm going to go into higher calculus or something, that maybe if my parents still know that, then maybe it has been useful in their lives. So that's great. So we'll put on the screen at the end of this program the contact information for you, so that if parents want to find out about this kind of course, they can. So you said they were talking about fractions. Is that what you said in the math? I didn't hear you, but I'm sure you said it. If you would repeat it, what exactly is taught in this class?
They're your basic pre-algebra and algebra skills. So fractions, decimals, percents, algebraic equations, things like how to use a graphing calculator. If that's a need the parents have, we can go through how to use that. Kids come home today with these calculators that I think they could run the whole house with at times. So knowing how to use that calculator, different linear equations, things like that.
Oh, okay. So it's geared more toward elementary and middle school math. I mean, it's the basics of that, right?
It is. It's kind of mainly that middle school, maybe some early high school in there, but a lot of it that 5th grade and up.
How long have you been with Sylvan Learning Center?
I've been with Sylvan for about 7 years now.
Have you seen any changes in the students' attitude toward math, or their need, maybe their willingness to express a need for assistance? Are there any trends that you see or could talk about?
I haven't noticed any trends, honestly. I think when they come to us, they're really looking for help. Some of the students don't realize it at first, but mom and dad know they need help. And being in the small group settings, we teach at a 3-to-1 ratio, so they get that chance to really interact with the teacher closely. They become pretty comfortable and let us know what they need. And a lot of times when they see that they can do it, because we start them where they can be successful right away, they tend to turn right around, especially with math. If it's something they've been struggling with for years and all of a sudden they can do it again, it's, oh, okay, I'm willing to try this again. So
that small, more individualized instruction may be what builds confidence. And you said already that, and that's important, you set them up so they can succeed. So you don't have more boys coming in for help versus girls. Is that pretty steady?
It's pretty steady. It changes. I mean, there are times where we might have a lot more boys than girls, but usually it tends to switch back at some point. I think all the girls bring in their friends in, things like that. So it truly depends on who needs help at that time.
How often, in typical tutoring sessions, I mean, how long are they? Are they usually a few times a week? Is it, is it different?
It is different. It's based on what each child needs. So we start them off with an assessment to find out what do they need and about how long we think it will take to meet their goals. And then from there, we can design a schedule around that so that they can be done when they want to be done. Basically, most of our students come 1 or 2 hours at a time, a couple, 2-3 times a week. But it's really, some students come more than that. It really depends on what they need.
What do you know about the testing that's being done? My children, I don't think they were tested for math. I'm trying to think, what grades? What's being tested in New York State now? Do you know what's being tested?
It used to be the 4th and 8th grade. You always heard about the 4th and 8th grade tests, which were language arts and math. And now we do language arts and math 3rd through 8th grade. So every grade, they have an assessment to find out where they're at. So it's from the No Child Left Behind legislation is where it came from. So we want to see where our children are and be able to reevaluate that. So they are given a pretty comprehensive test once a year, once they get into 3rd grade and up to high school.
Do you think the teachers, do you think their teaching is different now with those requirements? Do you think what's being taught in a typical classroom is any different than what was occurring before the tests were required? Are the teachers teaching to the test, and does that mean that you're tutoring to the tests as well?
Well, the curriculum behind the test and behind what, even before the tests happen, is based on New York State standards. So the curriculum itself has basically been the same. You'll see test prep going on now so that students become comfortable with the format of the test, which is something you didn't see before as much, a little bit, but not quite as much. And that's something we've incorporated if the students need to become comfortable with that format. But as long as they're understanding the curriculum, they should do pretty well on that test. So hopefully it hasn't changed what's going on in most classrooms. They're learning what they need to learn.
What's also different in the last at least 10 years, maybe 5, I'm not sure, is that they're requiring the schools on the basis of the results of those tests to provide extra help to the students. I think that's why in our library we're seeing a lot more tutoring coming in. So I would just say that the atmosphere is different, and they're really trying to get everyone, they're kind of required to make sure that everyone succeeds at even the beginning, elementary level.
Yes.
So there's the recognition, what you were talking about with math, is that you need to succeed at the beginning with the building blocks. What would you like to tell parents, reiterate, clarify about trying to help your kids succeed in math?
There's a lot of resources out there, and parents really want to help their child out and make them succeed in their math. So using your resources, talk to your child's teacher, go out, use your library. There's lots of materials here, resources for parents to relearn that math. A lot of parents use it every day, but some of the concepts they haven't seen since last time they were in school. So going back and doing refreshers, there's lots of different resources on the internet that you can look up. Just our website, you can download a free math workbook that you can use over the summer so that you continue with that knowledge. There's a lot of free resources. There's paid sites that you can get some extra help. There's online tutoring. There's different things that if you need an outside source like Sylvan or a private tutor, there's different ways to research that as well. So if it gets to be too hard for the parent to really help their child, then utilize those resources. You're getting your child the help they need.
You just mentioned something that I just want, before we leave, I want to just mention that you talked about over the summer and how children lose some of their skills, and particularly I think math is the area where they lose.
They definitely do. We have a very technical term for that called summer learning loss, where they backslide. And the schools reteach, the first about 6 weeks is reteaching what students learned the year before so that they can get back up there. So if anything you can do over the summer to keep students going is important.
Right, that's great advice. I want to thank you so much. We will have the phone number and address and web address of Sylvan Learning Center if anyone wants to contact you about this free course for parents. Say again the title.
Forgotten Math for Parents.
Okay, so that's what we want to do, is put the tools in the parents' hands to help their children.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Kathleen.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being with Parenting in the 21st Century.